Make sure everybody's microphones are. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the Kingston Municipal Planning Commission. If everybody's had a chance to, well, let's call the roll.
Chair Wright.
Here.
Vice Chair Lovin.
Here.
Secretary Pickle.
Here.
Mayor Neal. Mr. Bachman. Here. Mr. Frog. Mr. Qualls. Mr. Tipton. Mr. Owens.
Here.
Mr. Clifton. Here.
Two Cliftons.
We've got a quorum, we've got 6 present.
Thank you.
Did I leave- I left
Oh,
Farmer
Mr. Mike
out.
Farmer, brand new. Brand new.
Brand spanking. Now, is she taking Mr. Quall's place? Is
Yes.
Mr. Farmer. Present. Gotcha.
All right, we did not have a meeting in February or January, so the minutes are from December. If there's no corrections or deletions, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Madam Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Owens, second by Mr. Levin.
Chair Wright.
Yes.
Mr. Lovin.
Yes.
Secretary Pickle.
Yes.
Mr. Botkin.
Yes.
Mr. Owens.
Yes.
Mr. Clifton.
Yes.
And Mr. Farmer.
Yes.
Passes, Chair.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to reports. I have nothing to report apart from Mr. Farmer taking over for Mr. Qualls, and we wish you luck with us. Is there anything else to report? Mayor and city manager aren't here. Is there any other issues to report?
Let me go ahead and introduce myself to Mr. Farmer.
Okay.
My name's David Williams, and the reason I'm here is I'm employed by the East Tennessee Development District, and they've contracted with my agency to provide planning expertise or at the meetings and as needed. So anyway, that's why I'm here. I'm not the final answer on anything. I make recommendations.
Try to keep us straight. This next agenda item is to hear from the public. The only person here from the public is on the next agenda item, which is the rezoning request of R1 to R2 by Matt Caldwell. Properties along Longville Road, map 58, parcel 105, and map 58E, group A, parcel 3. And it's, if everybody's got the map in front of you. Mr. Caldwell, is there a specific reason why you're wanting to have this rezone from R1 to R2?
In the R1 district, you can have 75-foot lots, I think. In R2, you can have like 55 or something like that. Actually, around 60 is where construction costs sort of work on this one because losing some of it to TVA right away. So there'd be, some yield loss there. Current subdivision costs per linear foot are really high, so I'd like to have a little bit of flexibility. But it's really, if there was a variance allowed down to 60 feet in R1, I wouldn't be, or, if R1 allowed you to do 60-foot lots, I wouldn't even be asking for a request, but that was the thought.
So you mean 75 feet width?
Right.
Okay, so you're right, R1 is 75. R2,
It's 50.
50. 50 feet. So let's go ahead.
For R2, yes.
Let's go ahead and get this on the floor for discussion. Do I hear a motion?
So moved, Madam Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Owens. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bodkin. Mr. Owens.
Other than the lot width, what's the intent difference between R1 and R2, David?
Single family house.
R1,
Intent is to do single-family housing with just smaller lots.
Right.
course, if it was rezoned, you would be allowed to do anything that's allowed in the R2 district, you know, provided the requirements were met.
which is single-family, multiple-family dwellings, churches, schools, offering general education courses, horticulture, forestry, not involving advertising, display, or public sale of products or premises.
He's gonna come back with a plat that has to be approved by us.
That's right. I'm just explaining for people who haven't read the zoning, what's allowed in that zoning. Any other, Mr. Levin, you have any discussion?
Well, I was wondering what this little dash line is cutting across the property.
That's TVA transmission line.
No, not that. It goes, it's like parallel with Longville Road. I don't really know what it is, but just wondered.
Where? Let me see.
I was curious if I was in the city limits.
That's the city limits.
Is it new or old city limits or existing city limits?
It's existing city limits.
But it is in the city, correct?
It is.
Well, the front part appears to be.
Yeah.
You can have a lot that is half in, half out.
Oh,
Huh?
well, I may be confused if I don't, you know, is most of the acreage outside the city?
It all shows as being, Mr. Caldwell, in the city, because it's all zoned as, there's one property and there's the other.
I wondered if that was old city.
Hold on, it may be. Let me pull up my zoning map.
It wouldn't be all zoned
Wouldn't it be simpler to grant the
as
variance?
R1.
No, because you can see the city limits are in the interstate
Well,
corridor.
The county has some R1s on it.
They don't come across.
You wanna do that, or you wanna leave with it?
Well, I just wanna ask a
But it's
question.
inside the city.
It sure seems like it'd be cleaner.
Mr. Levin has the floor at the moment, and then we'll go to. It's in the city,
Yes, certainly, it's in the city.
the entire thing.
I wonder what the dash line was there.
It must be an old, and, you know, as you know, the property assessor, the state property comptroller's website is not to be depended on.
Okay, I guess my biggest concern with reducing lot sizes is topography and how that affects the lot sizes and the runoff. I can fully understand it's flat ground, it's easy to fit smaller things on smaller lots, but you know how it is with topography. It's more difficult if you're on a slope. I'm sure you'll take that into consideration when you bring the next thing to it.
Anything else, Mr. Levin? Mr. Farmer?
I just have a question. I mean, Mr. Caldwell stated that his, primary desire was to have it 60 feet. What kind of process do you have to go through for a variance? Because if you, right now, if we approve this, then you can take it down to 50 feet. If he has no desire to go below 60, why wouldn't a variance be cleaner? I mean, it's just a question.
Well, we try to avoid variances
Okay.
as much as possible. It opens up a can of worms.
New kid on the block.
No, that's fine. The way variances are written into state law for zoning is to prevent a piece of property that already exists from being worthless for development purposes because of slope, size, shape, being floodable, having only one place to put the septic system if it's not served by water or sewer, you know, those are all grounds for a variance. They're designed to prevent a property from having what you'd call an administrative taking of property due to regulations like zoning.
You know, the other reason I ask, Mr. Levin brought the point out, you know, if we go to, you know, if we're going to have a stated limit of 60, okay, this doesn't stop at 60. As it is right now, you have to have a width of 75, which can, you know, the higher the density, and this would just allow you to go beyond what the petitioner has requested, to go from 75 down to 50 and instead of 75 to 60, but if that's a messy thing, I'm sorry I brought it up.
Of course, if you went down to smaller lots, you would also have to extend water, sewer, and roads for access and that sort of thing. So there would be the development cost. He's already acknowledged that this would be more cost effective, you know, more lots for the same amount of water and sewer, but, you couldn't rely on septic systems if you went to the smaller lots.
Well, we don't allow
Anything less than
septic,
20,000.
yeah, we don't allow septic in the city of Kingston.
If sewer's available, and
That's
that's,
right.
I think, the way most places operate too.
But even going to the R2 with the smaller lot size, it doesn't negate the 60-foot of road frontage
Correct.
requirement, so they couldn't just be 50 feet wide at the street.
Yeah, he would have to put in roads, public, private, whatever.
Right, but the lots would still have to be 60 feet at the road.
Yes,
That's a good point. That's in the subdivision regulations.
Right.
that's right. Do you understand what he means by that? Okay. Mr. Owens?
Is it your intention to develop and build on all the lots within this area soon?
I don't build, I'd just be developing.
Do you have anything else?
But you'd be offering them for sale
Correct.
as soon as you're done. Does anyone have any other concerns of the expanded use of this area? And have the neighbors been notified?
Well, the other issue is, when you have smaller lots, you have a greater number of lots, which is a greater volume of traffic. And so, access to the existing roads, you have, two locations that it's touching Longville Road and what impact that has. So that's another concern that
I don't, the portion that's closest to Liberty Church, I don't think it would be easily accessible because of elevation.
Yeah, it's such a narrow section anyway. You have much more road frontage further down.
Do you have a number of lots that you're thinking about, and maybe look at the difference between R1 and R2?
No, I haven't done I just sort of know what costs are, and I'm just sort of doing sort of best use first, because I know it'll be tighter at 75 to 100 foot. But like you said, all lots aren't the same. There might be portions of the property that you can't get the yield. And I'm assuming there'll be, because of topography, you'll wind out losing areas to detention and slopes. So at the end of the TVA right of way, so I was just trying.
Yeah, that TVA transmission line is pretty wide at the front part of the property.
Right.
Typically 150 feet wide.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we have some setback requirements in the subdivision regulations pertaining to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the 10 acre behind that joins I-40 where the billboard is at going.
Parcel 115 that's landlocked.
Right, that's another reason I purchased it, because that parcel was landlocked.
You need the answer on this in order to hire an engineer to do the plat.
I'm trying to see what I have to, see what the number's gonna look like.
Mr. Owens, do you have any further comments?
No.
Mr. Bodkin? Mr. Pickle?
Do we have any concerns about spot zoning? Do we?
I think it's probably large enough tract that it would stand on its own, whether the merits to either have it rezoned or not. It's adjacent to commercial property, which is a more intense use than the R2, so and it's got, you know, a good road access.
Where's the commercial property?
What's that?
You mean the church?
I mean,
No.
across the street, I'm talking about the C2 zone.
Oh, okay. I
It
see.
may not show on what I handed out very well.
I've got it.
Okay.
I see what you mean.
I mean, there's certainly R2 in the vicinity, but not necessarily touching that parcel.
Correct.
but C2 is well across the street.
How hard of a lift is it to change the minimum width in R one to be a little bit lower just than all R one?
I think that's gonna take a much larger discussion.
Okay, I just,
Say you make it lower, like less than 50 feet?
no, less than.
75.
to
Oh,
60.
okay, yeah.
Changing it 15 feet. The large parcel that takes up the rest of the ridge there at some point in time.
This rezoning should be considered on whether the uses permitted in this district are appropriate, and not necessarily on what, Mr. Caldwell, of course, we all believe and trust him, but that's not really the point. The point is this property worthy of being rezoned to to R2?
That's right.
Because at some point, if anything that's allowed in the R2 could go in there if it met the requirements.
Mm-hmm. And there's,
Lot size, number of units per unit of property, you know what I mean? So, I mean, he could say all day that he wants to put in apartments or houses or small lots or whatever, but anything that's allowed in the R2 could go in, like I said, if it meets the requirements.
And
I'm
it-
not disputing what Mr. Caldwell's saying, because
I could get hit by a bus tomorrow.
and it is adjacent to C2, and there is R2 around it as well.
Yeah.
It's all houses.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I just want to make sure we were all on the same page.
Mr. Clifton? Nothing? I don't have any comments either. So let's go ahead and take a vote. We have a motion in a second
Is that
to rezone this
was
from,
that to recommend or just call?
to recommend to city council for R1 to R2.
Okay. Yeah, I've got a motion by Mr. Owens, a second by Mr. Botkin. Okay. Ready for the, vote?
I am.
Chair Wright,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lovin,
Yes.
Secretary Pickle,
Yes.
Mr. Botkin,
Yes.
Mr. Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Clifton,
Yes.
Mr. Farmer.
Yes.
Passed unanimously, Chair. I'll work with David to make sure we have a ordinance to
Yeah.
reflect that. I
And
didn't have one, bring one tonight because a lot of times, Attorney McPherson likes to
he does, and that's what I was gonna give you some dates.
review them first.
Our workshop date is April 5th. Our regular meeting is the 12th. And you're right, Mr. Sandy will want to take a look at it.
And,
Cause that's
Mr. Farmer, just so you know, the state law requires that the
This first one.
planning commission make a recommendation on any changes to the zoning ordinance or the zoning map, which is a part of the ordinance, and it's up to the city council to either enact or not enact an ordinance that will make that change, just so you and everybody else knows.
Yeah, we have a similar practice at the county.
Yeah, goes through two bodies,
Yeah.
so it's a good thing. Okay, next on the agenda is other business. I forgot to mention at the beginning of the meeting that, we need to go through our subdivision regulations and, make a acceptable new copy of them. There are several changes that need to be made. Even though I think our newest version that probably everybody has 2006 on it, I believe there may be a 2016. Right. So we need to start going through that. I'm going to have, Kelly is going to send to you all in your email the latest copy for everybody to start reading through. And starting next month, we're going to start slowly going through the things that may need to be changed on it. It's probably going to be a long process. And like Kelly said, we probably should have done it for the past 2 months when we had no business, but it's going to be a arduous process anyway. So we'll start looking at that in April.
That'll be fine.
And that way it gives you all a month for a little bit of light reading.
One thing that's always stood out to me is the 60 foot of road frontage,
Mm-hmm.
because that's contrary to, and I'm getting ahead of us, but that's one thing that's always stood out to me. Most places, every other place I work with just about requires 50,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the width of the right of way. If the road was going back into a large piece of property,
Mm-hmm.
and, there would be enough road frontage for somebody to put like a road in to develop the remainder of the property.
Mm-hmm.
And, 60 feet is a little bit contrary to the 50 feet of width or that we have for lots in the,
I'm sure there's plenty in there that
yeah,
we'll be
and
able to.
I've noticed that for some time, and anyway, I just thought they ought to be like consistent,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Any other comments before we adjourn?
Did the county not just redo their subdivision regulations?
I think they did, didn't they?
Would
They
it be
did.
possible we could
Yeah.
get a copy of that and include it and compare? It might make it
Sure.
easier. Making things streamlined across the board would be wonderful.
You want a paper copy or an electronic
However
copy?
you want to give it.
Well, I tell you what, I see Glenn and all the people on the Road County Planning Commission involved, I'll see if they can, be willing to do that.
Surely they have a digital copy.
Oh, I'm sure they do,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know it's not online because I've looked for it before.
But they do have one.
They do have one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I request that all the time, so.
Anything else? There's no other business. We will adjourn.
And there it is.